We are thrilled to welcome Mr. Guy Spiegelman from EMEA-led healthcare and life sciences startups at Amazon Web Services as our keynote speaker. He will talk about AI and machine learning, how they can benefit healthcare institutions, and how Amazon Web Services is applying them. So, Guy, the floor is yours.
Good morning or hello, and wherever you are in the world. I'm Guy Spiegelman. I have the absolute privilege to lead up the EMEA practice, that's Europe, Middle East, and Africa practice for healthcare and life science startups at Amazon Web Services. And today we're going to be talking about transforming healthcare with AI and machine learning. But first, a big, huge shout out to the organizers today. What a great content, startups, networking opportunities. You know, in this difficult time, we're managing to come together and really try and solve some of the biggest problems that are facing the planet today. And that's a huge privilege. So I'm really excited to share this presentation with you. So before I begin, this guy, Jeff Bezos, over 20 years ago, set up Amazon with three really, really basic ideas. Let's put the customer first, let's invent, and then let's be patient. And that's what we're still doing till today. Now, AWS, Amazon Web Services, is the cloud computing arm of Amazon. Cloud computing has really transformed the way business is being done across the world. It's not only about taking our computing and storage and database capacities and making that as a service, as like a sort of infrastructure that you can have available on tap. It's also more advanced services like AI and machine learning, IoT, robotics, and more. And you know, in terms of healthcare, at AWS, we've really been covering healthcare for over 8 years with a dedicated healthcare and life science cloud technology practice. And everyone in there has an average of around 17 years of industry experience from bench to bedside. They can be nurses and physicians and chief digital officers and bioinformaticians and biochemists and researchers. And we're here to really help you, the startups and the health systems, succeed in your digital transformation, in your journey to the cloud. Now, when we talk about putting customers first, what we talk about in the terms of healthcare is obviously patients. And really, it is all the work that you guys are doing, and whether you're a startup or a health system or one of the other ecosystem players, at the end of the day, what we want to do is bring the best solutions to patients. Now, at AWS, we don't work directly with patients. We work directly with you. Whether you're a provider or a payer, a hospital, an insurer, a government organization, a diagnostics service, a healthcare IT vendor, a startup, we want to empower you so that you can get your solution to patients faster. We have a secure and reliable global infrastructure that is really covering, and for us, it's a day one job, right? We have to get this right from day one, whether it's GDPR in EMEA or HIPAA in the US. You want to know that when you're building a solution on AWS, you can build it and meet the regulatory requirements wherever you are. We work and have the privilege to work with some of the largest healthcare organizations in the world, be they providers or payers, the NHS, the FDA, industry, Cerner, Philips, Change Healthcare, 3M, but even more important, and in my perspective, because that's what I love the most, is that we really help so many of the startups out there doing incredible and groundbreaking things, which are going to transform the industry and bring better care to more patients. Now, like in the context of AI and machine learning, what are the challenges that we're hearing from our healthcare customers? And it's really important when you're designing a new startup or founding a new startup and you're designing a solution. It's really important to listen to your end customer. And yes, it might be the patient, but we have to understand that until we get to the patient, we have to work with the medical and the clinical community and the operations teams at hospitals and other providers. And what we're hearing is that, and the challenges we're hearing, is that value-based care requires data-driven decision-making, but there aren't the necessary resources to implement. Another thing we're hearing is a lot about physician burnout. It's tough out there. I mean, we know and we're all witness to what's been happening in 2020 with the huge burden on the clinical community. But this didn't start in 2020. Physician burnout is everything from having to type in records and admin and not enough staff, a lot of manual processes. We also are hearing that the traditional IT model, it lacks the agility we need to keep pace with new technology. It's great that there are new technologies out there. We want to use IoT. We want to use voice in healthcare. However, the new technology is not able to access the system because the system lacks the agility. Insufficiency, security, compliance, and availability. So, if you're going to be bringing in a solution, a digital-based solution or some sort of technology, it has to be super secure, it has to be compliant, it has to be highly available. How do we do that effectively? And the last point, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, is delivering the customers today. What they expect is to be delighted by the experience of healthcare, like they're delighted by some of the other digital experiences they're having, whether it's how they access their bank account or how they do their shopping. That sort of expectation of service and availability, patients are now expecting that in healthcare as well. So how can machine learning help? Okay, so it can help in an enormous amount of ways. Care quality improvement, okay? Ultimately, that's what we want to get to, is that we can improve the quality of care for more patients. Operational efficiency, just as important. We want to actually reduce the burden on healthcare systems. Maybe our digital solutions can assist with that, and our machine learning can understand where the bottlenecks are and free them up. Revenue cycle managing, compliance with personal health information, patient and population health analytics. We've seen that again through the crisis. How can we identify the most high-risk groups and bring in preventative measures? And increasing customer engagement, what I talked about before. Within those areas, I could talk about so much and bring so many examples, but I'm going to focus on a couple. The first one is predicting patient health events, and the second one is personalizing the consumer health journey. Let's dive into predicting patient health events, because if we can predict patient health events, maybe we can prevent some downward spiral and save lives. So Amazon.com, and maybe many of you are familiar with that, we really have developed over the years a huge practice around personalized recommendations, inventory management, fulfillment automation. And we have now brought that to many startups and companies across the world. But let's talk about it in the healthcare context. If a patient arrives today, we can go back and look 12 months at their data. And based on that data and comparing that to other similar patient journeys, we can potentially predict a chronic heart failure incident 15 months before onset and intervene to save that person's life or to reduce the severity of that predicted incident. If we're looking at imaging, it's a great use case, imaging. So we want to predict patient health events. And you may be sending someone for an X-ray, looking for one thing and finding another, and being able to warn the radiologist and then the cardiologist or the chest specialist that there's a lung puncture. I'm going to give an example from an Israeli startup called Vocalis, which is dealing with vocal biomarkers, and the product they're working on is a sort of voice monitoring solution. And so a patient, Richard in this case, with COPD, is prescribed post-hospital a voice monitoring solution, speaks a few seconds a day into the phone. When shortness of breath is detected through the app, the Vocalis app prompts Richard to answer some simple discovery questions. That's then sent to the physician, and then a monitor and review is given. The patient is then called. That Richard gets some inhalers, steroids, and antibiotics, and doesn't have to go to hospital because he was the intervention happened in advance. And that's based on a lot of machine learning, understanding Richard's patterns and being able to understand when there's a downward spiral. Let's talk about predicting patient health events. So that's what we were just doing, sorry. Now we're going to talk about personalizing the health journey. So in this point, what we're hearing, the key industry trends that we're hearing is that personalizing patient engagement at every touch point. Like I said before, we are used to being consumers that are getting what we want when we want it. And now there's that expectation that this will happen in healthcare as well. So that means we need to modernize our contact centers to transform into valuable data sources. We need to think beyond the pill for treating and creating digital feedback loop with digital therapeutics. And we need to match patients with treatments that are more likely to benefit them. An example is MedStar Health, creating a single destination for patients. We've all been there. We want to access a healthcare service. You go onto some online site or portal or on your phone, and it's like they send you to many different areas. Here, let's have one place where we can get exactly what we need. I talked about voice in healthcare before as a vocal biomarker, and if you know Alexa, at the heart of Alexa is Lex, which is a conversational interface that you can put into any application using voice and text. That's an AWS service. That's an Amazon Web Services service that if you have a startup that wants to, or a health system that wants to incorporate voice into your application, you can already use this. A great example from the Boston Children's Hospital was a service that they're calling the Children's Enhanced Recovery After Surgery skill, which essentially, post-surgery, when the child is back at home, there's an Alexa skill to interact with that child and the parents to monitor their post-surgery recovery. So at the core of most machine learning use cases in healthcare is one of the core things that we're being asked to help with is the ability to extract, understand, and utilize unstructured data. And this will help AI-powered diagnosis, automated operations, and smart patient care. And that's why we introduced Amazon Comprehend Medical, which can take unstructured data, a medical note by a doctor, and turn it into a structured data set, and then link it after that to actions, ontologies, and so forth. So here's a bit of unstructured clinical notes. You don't need to read the details, but let's see, when it runs through Amazon Comprehend Medical, we can pick up the demographics, the disease indicators, the medication. This is allowing the Fred Hutch Cancer Center to find patients for clinical trials in a process that took weeks, now takes a matter of minutes. Remember I talked before about physician burnout? Let's think of a doctor, and she's with one of her patients, and she's wanting to really look the patient in the eye and understand what's going on, but at the same time, she's being forced to write notes and fill in the medical record. Well, this is where Amazon Transcribe Medical comes in, where if you can have a microphone-enabled client, it will listen to the conversation and extract the relevant data, and then it links into what we talked about before, Comprehend Medical. And again, this is a service, it's already out there. And if I have a message for you as a startup or a health system, don't try and develop these things on your own. We've got this and you can use it already. And then you can do the cool differentiated stuff, the cool stuff, use the undifferentiated stuff, the infrastructure we've developed, and you go and add your layer on top of that. Another one is extracting data from images. That's really important when you're looking at x-rays and let's say you want to run some training. Let's say you want to take a whole lot of x-rays, put it in the cloud, do some analysis on it, but you're required to de-identify. Well, using Amazon Recognition and Comprehend Medical, you can take the text out, you can block it off, you can then de-identify, do your processing on it, re-identify it back, send it back to the clinic. Just a couple of messages of how you can work with this. So more machine learning happens on AWS than anywhere else. The way we like to see it, if you're building a machine learning solution, there are three sort of levels to that. So there are your sort of superpower, high performance, high capacity data scientists, machine learning experts who can work at the infrastructure level, right? They're going to be using their TensorFlow, PyTorch. They're going to be running their workloads on some of our great computing instances. But that requires a lot of engineering know-how. At the next level, we have what we call our machine learning services. And so that's great if you're data scientists and you don't want to have to deal with setting up complicated environments. We have that as a managed service so you can focus on data science itself. And like at the top level, we have what we call our AI services, where you don't actually need to be a data scientist, but rather just program in an API call to use things like Amazon Comprehend Medical or Textract or Translate, or and there's a whole suite of services that you can use just with a simple API call. So, that's one call to action: is have a look at what we're doing in machine learning and then speak to us. Now, we have a website dedicated to healthcare resources. We also have a website dedicated to startups and healthcare life science startups. Have a look at that up. You can just type it into one of your browsers and you will find it. Look up AWS and healthcare, or AWS healthcare startups. And then the other thing I'll say is please be in touch with us directly. We have a global startup business development team. We're all ex-founders, ex-investors. I came from a venture capital fund in Israel, and before that, medical device and healthcare delivery startups. And what I love doing more than anything is speaking to a startup and helping them with their strategy and helping them go to market and grow and thrive. With that, I will say thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy the rest of the content that's available here and the networking opportunities. And I hope to speak to you all soon.
Okay. No, I said thank you. That was really interesting. And I did not know that Amazon has a devoted team on healthcare and life sciences. How important is healthcare and life sciences in Amazon?
It's truly important. For Amazon Web Services, we really want to bring the power of the infrastructure that we've developed and the heavy lifting that we have enabled across the world. We literally have, availability zones across the world, and we've developed these platforms and services so that you can, and we call it undifferentiated heavy lifting. So we've got the computing and the storage and the AI ML. Now you can go and develop the special stuff. And that way we get better solutions faster to the customer, which is the patient. And we believe that cloud computing can transform healthcare so that we can get better healthcare to more patients across the world. And so we're very passionate about doing it. I mean, we've seen in the global pandemic now the amount of health systems that have turned to us to adopt telemedicine, or even, and this is a public use case, the race for a vaccine, Burnout, has used the power of our cloud to help fast track their target discovery and vaccine development. And so it's a real privilege that we can empower these kind of things, and we are building on our teams across the world to support more and more both startups, enterprises, and healthcare systems.
I totally agree. I think it's really powerful and can do a great job in bringing the new healthcare that we all pursue. And you have mentioned very interesting AI and ML tools. Can you share some startup stories with us?
I think one of the early use cases for AI and healthcare has been in imaging. So a company called AIDoc, they have FDA and CE marks for their algorithms. Essentially, if you think about it, you arrive at an emergency room and there's a critical time component. And so what AIDoc is able to do is take the scans, take it from the internal systems, and reduce the patient wait times by minutes. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but if you've had a brain hemorrhage, minutes is the difference between either life or death or severe impairment to your quality of life. And so I think this is a great example, and I want to take that a step further. Now that we know this technology exists, and I'm going to give this two angles. One is the patient angle, and one is the commercial angle. If we can get more of these kind of solutions out faster, we're going to help more people faster and help more people that get better care. And so that's the human side of it. That's why we want to do this, to help improve the human condition. But if you're in a startup like AI Doc is, and they will tell you this, it's also a race against the competition, right? There are other companies developing these algorithms. And what they say is that through AWS computing instances, they're able to run their training algorithms that much faster and bring their algorithms to market within a few months rather than years. And that's a big difference. That gives you a critical edge over the competition. If you're using AI/ML, using the right compute instances, you are able to get your product, be more agile, and get your product to market faster. And so that's a big message I have to startups around the world. Don't waste your time on the undifferentiated stuff. We're here to support you, develop your unique solutions, and go to market faster.
No, that makes sense. And I think it's that you have a very good global perspective. You see startups for all around the world. What would be your suggestion for startups regarding access to market, especially if they should consider entering the US market? Because this is something that Spanish startups think from time to time, or I mean, all startups around the world look at healthcare in the US, and what would be your message to them?
There's good news and the bad news about the US healthcare system. Okay, so let's start with the bad news. The bad news is for the US economy is that they spend way too much on healthcare compared to the results they get and compared to anywhere else in the world. The good news is for the startups in the room is that's a massive opportunity, a massive business opportunity. And I encourage all startups, whether you're developing in Spain, in Portugal, in Germany, Austria, Greece, Italy, Israel, or the United Kingdom, I suggest think about your international expansion from day one. It doesn't mean you have to act on it, but have it in the back of your mind and then move it forward as you move on, because that is where you're going to be able to scale and potentially make a lot of money with your solution. And that means when you architect your system, you're thinking not just about GDPR, but also about HIPAA. It's a small example, but it's an important one. When you think about your regulatory pathway, think about the CE mark and the EMA, but also think about the FDA, and just as important, the reimbursement pathway. Who is going to pay for this, right? That's a question all startups should ask themselves when you're developing any type of medical product. Even if it's a digital health product, there is going to be regulation. So I encourage very much, and you see the startup ecosystems that have done very well. I'll take Israel, where I am talking to you from today. It has a thriving digital health system, not just because of the local data repository that we have with the health system, but because from startups from day one are thinking about how are they going to enter the US market, the biggest healthcare market in the world. So I very much encourage the startups listening here. Yes, use your local market. If you're developing a product that is, treating someone with a knee problem or whatever, that knee problem is the same in every human around the world, but the economy of getting that to market is different around the world. So please think about how you're about healthcare.
Really good tips to think global, even that you need to prove local. I think that's really a good tip for everyone. But going more locally, what would be your vision or your understanding on what's happening on the Spanish life science ecosystem, and how you see us from outside?
So I think there is a huge amount of potential coming out of Spain. I think Barcelona is a real hub, but not just Barcelona. You've got some great life science, therapeutic development companies. You've got some good venture capital in that space. Excellent healthcare systems. Great hospitals that are engaged in global research. All of these things are opportunity points for startups to cooperate with that wider healthcare ecosystem in Spain. I think you have an advantage also going to the US. I didn't mention this, but the Spanish-speaking US market is an advantage. You can have your applications maybe adopted earlier there in the US because of that market. You've got some good case studies. I mean, we work very closely with Sakara Labs. They are developing solutions to simplify complex data analysis pipelines, particularly around genomics. It's complicated. It's hard work. You know, I was talking before about machine learning and applied to text. Behind all of these solutions, actually, there's a lot of work to do. It's not that simple. And what Sakara have done has made that complex data analysis pipeline processing that much simpler. And they released this open source core technology called Nextflow that is now being utilized around the world, including 3 of the top pharmaceutical companies. So, you know, we're very proud to partner with companies like Sakara Labs and others in Spain. We see great potential. And the good thing about having success stories like that is that the earlier stage startups have people to consult with, people who've done it before, who've made the success. And so then that builds more success. So I'm hopeful that Spain will be play a real global role, and it has all the potential to do so.
Yeah, that's exactly what we try to pursue with the Health Hub, and this is also the reason that we do events like today's event. And okay, let's talk a little bit about life with COVID and after COVID, because we all have seen huge adoption of telemedicine and digital health in general because of COVID impact. But I think it's even more important to talk about how you see the future after COVID. What will last? What will be this new future when this wave of adoption is over? And what do you think about this future?
Look, I'm going to particularly focus on how I think it'll affect healthcare going forward and healthcare innovation going forward. I think I've heard from global pharma companies that because of COVID, in terms of clinical trial management, processes that are taking 15 months are taking 11 days. I mean, that is a radical reduction in time and cost. And once you break that barrier, that sort of mindset that things that we used to have to take so long to do, we can now do a lot faster, there's no going back. I think the other big thing is around medical practitioners and patients and the willingness to do a telemedicine session. I think this is a sea change and we're not going back. I think doctors were quite apprehensive about doing telemedicine consults and clinics. And some patients were as well. And due to COVID, there was no choice. And everyone saw, actually, this isn't so bad. And I can get a lot done. I can get better care done. No one has to sit in the waiting room for hours. And I think those kind of things are going to be with us for a long time. So anything that is now enabling a better telemedicine experience or remote or a community-based experience, I think there's a huge opportunity. You know, think about mobile oncology clinics. We want to keep oncology patients away from hospitals because we don't want them to get disease. So if there's a bus, which is a mobile oncology unit that's going around, all the technology that needs to go in there to enable that service, it's complete blood counts, it's all sorts of data access. There's so much opportunity to do that, and it'll just result, I think, in a much better patient experience, a much better clinical outcome. And that is now with us, now that we've taken down those psychological barriers. And so that's a good thing. There's been a lot bad about COVID. Let's not mistake that a lot of people have lost their lives. A lot of people's families have been affected, both from a health and an economic point of view. And we should respect that and be conscious of that and be caring in this time. But let's also take the opportunities that have arisen and create a better future.
Yeah, no, I agree in many things you said. Many times I say that telemedicine has been the obvious thing that takes so much to happen. And now we see it happening. So I see also a great opportunity with this huge telehealth adoption to foster the adoption of all the technologies that can help healthcare be more scalable. So, yeah, well, we are finishing our time, our chat together. There's something you want to add to say to the community now that you have the opportunity?
Just it's a real privilege to be able to speak to you today. Keep doing what you're doing. To the BBH, I think you've done a fantastic job. And it's, Christian, I've really been a pleasure meeting you as well through this. And I look forward to many more cooperations and opportunities to cooperate in the future.
Sure, it's our pleasure too. Thank you very much for joining us today and giving your vision on healthcare. And well, this is almost over. We will continue with the program today. And Elena, are you?
Yes, exactly.
Continuing?
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much, Christian.
Bye.